Hello and welcome into this week's episode of the Recruiting Blitz. I am Greg Smith, Senior Recruiting Analyst here at Inside Nebraska, and I am joined once again, as usual, by Jansen Coburn, our digital content extraordinaire. Jansen, how are you, man?
Doing good, Greg. What's going on?
Oh, not a lot. I feel like I'm like most everyone in Nebraska media today, tired after kind of a
Long week.
whirlwind day. Yeah, it's been a long week, capped off by a whirlwind day, with Nebraska football and volleyball having games yesterday, and Nebraska volleyball obviously having like the match of the century. We were at two high school games this week. I'm pulling double duty with the national stuff. Like it's just been a lot this week, and this week is not actually my busy week. Next week is,
Yeah.
so it's just it's a lot, but I like it. We're in it now.
Yeah. Well, there's some, I guess, breaking news today. We can start with that. I know we got a little flack last week because people were complaining about us being so negative. So we'll get the negative out of the way first. Nebraska finally lost a commitment. We talked about it happening. I don't know if we mentioned this in particular, but Callen Barta, he flipped to Kansas State. Did that surprise you? What was your reaction when you saw that today?
No, it didn't surprise me. It should not have surprised our insiders board either. I've been hinting at it on our insiders board for 2 weeks. That's why you guys need to subscribe over at InsideNebraska.com. A nice plug there. I worked that in. But in all seriousness, yes, go subscribe because I thought this was coming. I thought that the tea leaves were out there. I had gotten some whispers that Callen was starting to look around, in particular at Kansas State, and that he had taken like an unofficial visit out there despite not having an offer. And then there was talks about him maybe getting an offer and taking an official visit. He returned this week for that official visit and then picked up his offer and then swiftly flipped from Nebraska to Kansas State. So a lot of times in these situations with those guys, especially from Kansas seems to be a school where like a lot of those kids do like to stay home and play in the state, which is totally fine. I don't think that people, for judging from the immediate reaction, I feel like Nebraska fans are not like too broken up about this, though it is interesting that he's having a really nice season on offense. Like his receiver stats have been very good so far this year. But Nebraska is definitely not hurting at defensive back right now. If you just look up and down their commitment list, they'll be able to absorb this blow, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, just like what you said, it seemed like they had enough guys on the board at defensive back, enough guys that they could kind of plug and play around with. And we'll talk about Caleb Benning's addition at the end, but it's another guy that can kind of fill the hole there. So,
Oh yeah.
yep. But anyways, we got the bad news out of the
Yeah,
way. It should be
we
good
we
from
we we
here.
ripped the Band-Aid off, and now guys stick with us because
All right.
I know y'all got on us last week about it. We'll roll into some better stuff here.
We got all greener pastures ahead.
Right.
All right. So as you mentioned, it's been a busy week, and we got out to some high school games Thursday and Friday.
Mhm.
We're checking out on some Husker commits. Let's start with Thursday. We went to Seacrest Field here in Lincoln, and we were watching Millard North take on Lincoln Southwest. Lincoln Southwest, right?
Yep.
Okay. And we were tongue twister. All eyes were on Husker commit Caden VerMaas, class of 2025. So what'd you see from him in the game, and what'd you think of the game just as a whole?
Yeah, I'll start with the game as a whole. The game as a whole was kind of a defensive battle, kind of slow paced game, but it went by quickly. Like at the same time, it was a tough one, and two teams kind of struggling on the season. I think both teams came in 3-5. Southwest picking up the win, and Millard North picked up the win. They had to come from behind win, and they made the playoffs because of that. So a big win for them. It was a really big game. But what I thought about Caden VerMaas is I like him a lot. Like and it's funny that I'll say the same thing about one of the next commits we talk about that we saw on Friday night. Is I don't think we talk about Caden enough in what type of player he is. Like, he's a tough kid. Our own Steve Mark was out there at the game with us as well, and he said this to me on the sidelines, that you just watch him play, you listen to him talk, and he feels like, as Matt Rule would say, an OU guy. Like, he just feels like a guy that is going to be a fixture at Nebraska and a real good player in the locker room as well. His game on the field, I really like. He's a safety type player that I think can play that rover spot. So think Isaac Gifford and what he's doing out there for the Huskers right now. He was a little limited on Thursday night when we saw him. He's got like a ankle foot injury that he's dealing with, but he was still out there and making plays. If I want to see him 100% healthy, because I think he's a force out there, and he's played much better games than the one that we saw him. But I'm still impressed with him and like his future.
Yeah, I think that was the big thing, is he's a little limited, so it's hard to gauge exactly how good he is with our own two eyes, not basing it off of what we've seen on his huddle film.
Right.
But yeah, watching the game, at first I was thinking that I wanted to see more from him, and then once I realized that he was banged up, then it made a little more sense.
Yeah.
All right, flipping over to Friday. You said Thursday's game was kind of ugly, and hate to say it, but Friday was much of the same. And then we'll talk about the Huskers game on Saturday also, and it was more of the same. I feel like
that was the theme of our weekend of football, actually. We saw some defensive football.
I don't know if these Nebraska high school coaches are trying to take on the style of play that Nebraska football plays with on Saturday, but it was 3 straight days of defensive struggles.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got out to, I think that's, what is that, Northwest? Omaha Northwest is where the field was at, but it was Omaha North and Elkorn South. Obviously, all eyes were on 2 Husker commits, Tyson Terry and Donovan Jones. What did you think of those 2 guys, how they played? And once again, what did you think of the game as a whole?
Yeah, we also had 3. We had Ashton Murphy over on Elkhorn South as well. But I'll start with the Omaha Ashton. North guys. Yeah, it's all good. And who actually he impressed me in a way. I'll get to him in a second though. But those guys on North, both of them are really, really good. And the same way that I said about VerMaas in the 25 class, and I'm going to write this at some point, whether it's at the end of the cycle when we get to like the early signing period or not, when we do kind of those, who are your top sleepers or the hidden gems of the class, however we end up phrasing it. And Donovan Jones, just spoiler alert, is going to be way up there on the list for me. Like, we never talk about him. All he did was make 22 tackles in that game on Friday night. And at one point, we kept saying his name just keeps getting called over and over again. We're hearing his name. I didn't realize it was 22 tackles and then an interception that we had on video as well. But yeah, 22 tackles on the night. And then it felt like when he wasn't making them, Tyson Terry was in the mix as well, the 2025 defensive tackle. And if you've listened to us before, you know how I feel about Tyson. I think that he's one of the best players in the state, regardless of class right now. And he's just perfect for Nebraska's defensive line. It just feels like a big time Big Ten defensive lineman to me when he gets to college. So I think both of those kids are really, really good. And then flipping over to Elkhorn South and Ashton Murphy, this was the first time that I've seen Murphy, or Elkhorn South in general, but Murphy definitely play this year in person. I saw them last year, but we were kind of focusing on the different matchup last year with kind of Maverick Noonan and Gunnar Gatula and what they had going on. So we weren't paying as much attention to Ashton, but seeing him and really kind of locking in on him, he's quick for a defensive lineman. Like, and obviously it has a frame that he's going to continue to put mass on as well. Like, I'll be really curious to see how he pans out in this 2024 recruiting class. Because I don't know if I do think that he's going to come to Lincoln as a defensive lineman. Like, I know that he plays both in high school, and there was some confusion over that kind of during his recruiting process. I think he's a defensive lineman, but I'll be curious to see how things work out for him.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that other than just from my observations watching the game. I thought Donovan Jones looked really, really good, and he kept catching my attention.
Yeah.
But all right, we'll shift over to Saturday, a long day, big day, and a really good day for Husker athletics as a whole when you just factor in football and volleyball. Really buzzy atmosphere in Lincoln from start to finish. I think a lot of people had hopes and dreams of what would happen on their mind all day, and it seemed to all come to fruition for Nebraska. So first off, what were your observations just from a game day atmosphere, the unity walk, the pregame, and all the festivities? What was it like in your perspective, just taking in Saturday?
Yeah, I did think that there was a buzz in Lincoln yesterday, and yeah, a good chunk of that had to do with volleyball, but it felt like a big game day for Husker athletics, which was really cool to see, right? And so even from the beginning, and kind of the unity walk, they've started doing a thing with football now where they have the recruits kind of come out there and they're the last thing that kind of the players see. So if you've ever watched our video here on the YouTube with that, they walk through kind of the crowd and the cheerleaders and the band. Herbie is out there, and then they come up the steps and they come into the stadium. Well, right there at the top of those steps, there's a little half circle of recruits. So like Carter Nelson was down there. He was back in Lincoln this week after fresh off a visit to South Bend. Make sure to say that, because between, people at Nebraska fans, people on our message board want us to make sure that we note that Carter Nelson was back in Lincoln, and he, quote, knows where home is.
Like you predicted last week.
Yeah, just like we said last week, it's fine. But, we'll see. When you go visit tight end U, it's going to catch some people's attention. Sorry, as a tight end. But I digress. He was there. Danny Callen was also down there for the Unity Walk as well. And then some of the other guys, Donovan Jones was also right over there with them. But then the one guy that I really want to make note of, Alex Mansky, Nebraska's 2025 quarterback target, who is their number one quarterback target for that cycle out of Iowa. He was back on campus this weekend for what was his fifth visit. Since Matt Rule has taken over Nebraska. That's very notable. It is also notable that as the team walks through the Unity Walk, and the coaches have to come through there as well, Matt Rule kind of looked his way, but Matt Rule is always locked in at all times. And so he just kept on going. Yeah, at that point, I think the hoodie might have been down, but he had like this huge Adidas bag. It was very weird. But after that goes down, Marcus Satterfield, Nebraska's offensive coordinator, makes a beeline right for Mansky and his family, and he had to stand there the whole rest of the time. He was over there talking to them, to the point to where when the recruits then left and all went one way, Mansky and his family with Satterfield and just kept going into the stadium. So that just goes to show you like how much attention and love they give to Alex Mansky when he's on campus. And rightfully so. He's a really, really good player that's having a great junior season. And I think he would be a great addition to Nebraska's class if they can get him. I do think that they're the leader right now. But I've yet to talk to Alex yet today, so we'll see kind of how it went. But it seems like everybody so far had a great time. But that was kind of my observations. Oh, and then, sorry, you mentioned the on the field too as well. Like in the pregame when they had the recruits down there, that was another really good atmosphere. A couple of guys that we hadn't seen yet this year. Evan Taylor, the commit out of North Carolina, defensive back commit, he was in town and he was on campus or on the field. He still has his crutches because he had a knee injury early in the season, but he's expected to make a full recovery. And Rex Guthrie, a guy that's kind of a podcast favorite for us, was also there. And they were kind of being greeted and talked to by some of the other commits. I saw Carter with them, Danny Callen, Isaiah McMorris, and Davon Hall also spent some time with them. So it was good to see that. I feel like every week we see like more camaraderie with those commits, and we've gone out and talked to these guys at their games, and I feel like every time we talk to them, they mention the camaraderie between each other, and so it's really cool to see that play out on a Saturday too.
Yeah, I don't know if you had the chance to talk to any recruits today, gauge their reactions, and if they gave you any good quotes or anecdotes. But has anybody said anything about yesterday and just the atmosphere?
Yeah, so far though, I think so as a time that we're actually recording this, the only guy that I've gotten quotes from so far is Uchino Ojata, who is a 2025 defensive end. He's an edge out of Indianapolis. He actually picked up an offer while he was here in Lincoln. And as a defensive guy, I had to ask him like what he thought about seeing that defense. And he told me that it was great to see those guys fly around, and he could really picture himself playing in that defense and thinks that it would be awesome. I think that that's something that we would hear from every single defensive player that you talk to about that, because it's really one thing that's really coming into focus about that defense is that not only is it fun for like everyone to watch, those guys are really getting excited about the potential to play in it. And it helps when you see so many different guys get out there and get to play, so many young players out there playing. You don't feel like you're going to be waiting forever for your turn, and they're going to find ways to develop you. I think that's when we look back on this season from a recruiting standpoint, specifically on defense, I feel like that's going to be a huge storyline, that so many defensive players are now interested in what Nebraska's doing on defense.
Yeah, and another guy who evidently likes what he's seeing from the defense is Caleb Benning, who just joined the class on Friday. As a matter of fact, I think Caleb might have been in the bushes at the Omaha game watching us to see when we were least prepared for his
Yes.
announcement, because minutes before the game kicks off, he commits, and we had to scramble a little bit, but we made it out okay. Yeah, just first things first, what are the thoughts on his commitment?
Yeah, big deal for Nebraska. Like for many reasons. One, he's a really great player. I don't know. Because we've seen basically all of these guys now in state. I don't know where you would rank him with all of the guys that we've seen. He's one or two. For me, it's either him or Carter Nelson. It's just so hard with Carter to really truly judge because they're playing two totally different levels of competition, and so it's really hard to do. So he's either one or two for me from all the guys that we've seen in state. And so that's always good. He's also a great kid. He would, like we were saying before, with VerMaas, he's good. Caleb is going to be great in the locker room as well. He's got good leadership qualities. He's a coach on the field out there, all of that stuff. Then you add in the additional layer that he was not going to come to Nebraska under the previous staff. Like, I feel like it's okay to say that, like, it just wasn't going to happen. This staff did a great job of recruiting him and bringing him back into the fold, just like a handful of other guys that are in this class from inside the state as well. And that's always a really good sign that basically, and I feel like I said this a long time ago, maybe back in the winter, I felt like if guys in state gave the staff a chance to really actually recruit them, then they would end up really liking them. We saw it with Tyson Terry, another guy we've talked about, who openly said that the previous staff would not have landed him. We've seen it across the board. So I think that that's a big deal for them to kind of make that comeback to be able to land the verbal commitment from Caleb Bennett.
Yeah, and first things first, on where you talked about where he fits in as far as who's better players in the state. I definitely think he's up there at the top as far as his versatility. He affects the game on offense and defense, and he's dynamic on special teams. So he's a great pickup for Nebraska, and he'll fit in nicely. And I'm glad you mentioned him probably not going to Nebraska, or at least it not being a lock with the last staff. So a lot of people assumed, myself included, it was just a matter of time before he would commit to Nebraska. And I even prepared his commitment graphic over the summer because I expected it could happen at any point. And people just assumed that his commitment was a given just because he's in state, Nebraska's right there, and he's obviously a legacy recruit. But the process seemed to play out. And what I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, and whether or not you agree, it seemed to me like he gave each of the schools that were recruiting him a fair shot, and he truly evaluated them and watched them, and almost as if he treated Nebraska as a nameless, faceless team and just watched and evaluated what he was seeing on the field. And he still came to the conclusion after watching them that it was a good fit, independent of it happening to be Nebraska and being right in his backyard. So to me, it looks like he committed to Nebraska because it was truly a good fit, especially with that defense. And as you mentioned, a lot of the defensive players love what they're doing. I don't know if you think that's, or you feel the same way, and that's more why he committed to Nebraska, more so than him just being a legacy and being from Nebraska, but that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I do think that that's the way he kind of went about his process. I think if you have ever read anything about Caleb or seen any of his interviews, he is not going to come across as a kid that just makes rash decisions. He definitely kind of played the process out, wanted to get to know each of those coaching staffs, and he wanted to feel like those coaching staffs really had a plan for him and really wanted him. But there's also something within what you said that wanted to kind of watch them. It's not even so much to see them like play and how they were playing. It's more so to see if the things that the staff was telling him about how they would play actually matched up with what he saw, right? Like, because I think that sometimes you hear these things in recruiting, and a coaching staff is recruiting you and saying all these things, and then you see them play, or you come watch their practice, or you go visit, and it just doesn't seem anything close to what they were saying, and recruits can kind of snip that out. I think the consistency of the message really helped here, and that's something that we do hear, though, about this coaching staff, is they're very consistent. They're not putting on a front. They're not faking it. Who they are is who they are, and that's why I think the guys that really vibe with them and and like them, like really, really like them. And then there are some players that are just like, hey, it's not for me. And even Matt Rule has said, hey, we're not going to be for everybody, but the guys that we are for, it's good. They know that we're going to pour into them and we're going to help to make them better football players and better men in the long run.
Yep. Well, that's all we've got for today, Greg. But before we get out of here, I want to give you a chance to brag about what you get to do next weekend. So, do you want to tell the people what you're up to next Friday? Because we won't be on the road for recruiting. At least I won't be.
Yeah. So this week, so I mentioned off top, I'm doing some more natural stuff. I'm covering some stuff in the Southeast. So Florida, Georgia, Alabama, which is why if you follow me over on Twitter at Greg Smith Rivals, you've seen more like Florida stuff, Georgia stuff, all of that. You might be wondering what's up with that. But I am going down on a trip to see some recruits this week. So Wednesday, I'll be flying into Jacksonville, Florida, and then I'll see a big time high school down there, check out their practice. And then on Thursday, I'll be in South Georgia, bouncing around some high schools, and then I'll be in Jacksonville on Thursday night to see a high school game with a Rivals 100 prospect and another 2025 top prospect as well. And then I'll be back in South Georgia on Friday night to see a different game with top recruits. And then I'll fly back to lovely Lincoln, Nebraska on Saturday morning to then see Nebraska take on Purdue. And we'll be back for observations and photo galleries and all of that stuff for the Purdue game because they'll be hosting recruits. And then at some point I'll sleep. But yeah, it'll be a busy Wednesday through Sunday for me this week.
Yeah, you weren't kidding when you said that this coming week was going to be just as much of a whirlwind as the last one.
Yeah, then on Monday, I mean, and then we'll have Matt Rule press conference tomorrow, and then stuff on Tuesday. So it'll be a busy week for me.
All right, Greg, tell the people what they need to know before we get out of here.
Yeah, make sure you guys like this video and tell a friend about it. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can get these videos directly into your feed. Also, pop over to Inside Nebraska, like we said off the top of the video. Make sure you're subscribed over there so you can get all the insight about recruiting and the football team and the undefeated volleyball season that's in the works after they're the new #1 team in the nation. And we will catch you guys next time.